Okay, Algebra 2C, we're here working on the review for 8.1 to 8.3. If you'll notice, there are only 4 questions, but each question asks you to solve a few different ways. Okay, the first question asks you to solve by factoring, by quadratic formula, and by completing the square. So what you should expect is that you'll get the same answer each way. So let's start with factoring. We have x squared plus 6x minus 55. So we got to look for two numbers that multiply to negative 55 and add to 6. And add to 6, which is going to be 11 and negative 5. Okay, so that's how we write our two factors. And then we have to use the zero product property to set both equal to 0. And then we'll solve. So we should get x equals negative 11 and x equals 5. So this is what we should expect for the rest of the two ways of solving. So let's go quadratic formula. I'm going to write the formula out. Opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so let's take a second and we'll figure out what is our a, our b, and our c. So I'm just going to plug those in. Okay, we have negative 6 because it's opposite of b, plus or minus b squared, which is 36, minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is negative 55. Don't forget that negative. All over 2 times 1. Okay, I'm going to do some simplifying. So I'm going to keep the negative 6 out there. But I'm going to simplify what's underneath the square root. So 36 minus 4 times 1 times negative 55 simplifies to 256. Okay, and the denominator 2 times 1 simplifies to 2. And now, square root of 256 is actually a perfect square, so that simplifies to 16 all over 2. Okay, so I'm going to get my two different answers. My first answer is going to be negative 6 plus 16 over 2, which simplifies to 10 over 2. And the other one is going to be negative 6 minus 16 over 2, which simplifies to negative 22 over 2. And these two simplify to 5 and negative 11. So you'll see we have the same answers. Now let's solve by completing the square. The first step, we got to get the x squared and the x alone. So I'm going to add 55. Now we got to have our blanks on both sides. So we can see what we need to add. Do a little side work. B over 2 squared. My b is 6, so 6 over 2 squared. 3 squared is 9. So that's what I'm going to add to both sides. Okay. And now I need to factor. Remember, we can always factor by b over 2. So it's going to be x plus 3 quantity squared equals 64. Now we're going to square root both sides. So we get x plus 3 equals plus or minus 8. So our first solution is negative 3 plus 8, and the next solution is negative 3 minus 8, which gives us the two solutions that we expected, 5 and negative 11. Okay, let's look at the bottom one. This one only asks us to do it two different ways. Solve by factoring and by square roots. So the way we got to think about it is it always has a trinomial. So it's missing the x term, so I'm going to put a 0x in there. So now we need two numbers that multiply to negative 121 and add to 0. So it's got to be the same number, a positive and a negative of it. So we have 11 and negative 11 using our zero product property. Set them both equal to 0. You should get the answer as positive 11 and negative 11. So we should expect the same thing over here when solving by square roots. Solving by square roots, we need to isolate the x squared term. So I'm going to add 121 to both sides. And now I can just square root both sides. So we have x equals, remember if we have an x squared term, we're going to have a plus or minus, which gives us the plus or minus 11, which is our two solutions. Okay, so let's flip it over. Looking at problem 3, this one asks us to solve by quadratic formula. by completing the square. So I'm going to put what my A is, my B, and my C. Okay, so we got to solve by quadratic formula. X equals opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. I'm going to plug them in. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared, which is 4, minus 4 times 1 times positive 6, all over 2 times 1. Let's simplify what's underneath the square root. Plus or minus, that 4 times 1 times 6 gives me a 24, so it's going to be minus 24, all over 2. Okay, so we do have a negative underneath the square root. Okay, so we have a negative 20 underneath the square root. And remember that if we have a negative 20, we should have an imaginary solution. So we can simplify this negative 20. I'll do a little side work right here. I can simplify it to the square root of negative 4 from the square root of 5, which simplifies to 2I root 5. So this next step, we should get negative 2 plus or minus 2I root 5 all over 2. And since each negative 2 and 2 are both divisible by 2, we can divide that out to get our final solution. Negative 1 plus or minus I root 5. Because this 2 over 2 simplified and 2 over 2 simplified there. Okay, so now we're going to solve by completing the square, and we should get the exact same thing. So we need to isolate the x squared and the x equals negative 6. I'm going to add my two blanks. B over 2 quantity squared gives me 2 over 2 squared, 1 over 1, so it just simplifies to 1. That's what I'm going to add to both sides. Okay, so now I'm going to factor, which is always b over 2, so x plus 1 quantity squared, because 2 is my b. And now that equals negative 5. So you'll notice now that we have to square root both sides, you should get an imaginary solution. So I get x plus 1 equals I root 5. Because all I can do is break this off into square root of negative 1 times the square root of 5, which simplifies to I root 5. And I'm just going to subtract 1. Remember, we're always going to have a plus or minus if we take the square root. Now if I subtract 1, I'm going to get my two solutions, which is the same as what we got using quadratic formula. Okay, last one, solve by factoring. Before I do anything, I'm going to bring them all to the same side. So I should have a 2x squared minus 11x minus 21 equals 0. So now it looks like everything else. Here's my A, my B, my C. So now I'll solve by factoring. We have 2x squared minus 11x minus 21 equals 0. I need two numbers that multiply to A times C, which is negative 42, and add to B, which is negative 11. Those two numbers are going to be negative 14 and 3. So that's how I'm going to split my middle term off. Negative 14x plus 3x, and I'm just going to bring down the first and the last term. So now if we have four terms, we can group. So I'm going to group the first two, group the second two, and I'm going to pull out the GCF. So I have 2x, x minus 7. If I pull out the GCF here, it's going to be a 3, and you have x minus 7. Okay, now we know we're doing it correctly because we have the x minus 7 in parentheses. It's the same thing, so now I'm going to factor out that x minus 7, and I have 2x plus 3 left. So now just like we factored in the beginning, let's use the zero product property. X minus 7 equals 0, and 2x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, go back to the bottom here. Now I'm going to add 7, get my first solution, x equals 7. Subtract 3, so I have 2x equals negative 3. Divide by 2, x equals negative 3/2. So here are my two solutions. So we should expect the exact same thing when using the quadratic formula. Let's check it out. Okay, I'm going to skip the quadratic formula. I'm just going to go right to plugging it in. Okay, we've done it a few times. So my b is negative 11, so the opposite is going to be a positive 11. Square root of b squared, which is 121. minus 4 times a positive 2 times a negative 21 all over 2 times 2, which gives me 4. Okay? Now I'm going to simplify this. What's underneath the radical simplifies to a positive 289 all over 4. And 289 is a perfect square, so we should get 11 plus or minus 17 over 4. And now let's write out our two different solutions. Okay, we have the first one is 11 plus 17 over 4, which simplifies to 7, because it's 28 over 4, which simplifies to 7. And x equals 11 minus 17 over 4, which simplifies to negative 6 over 4, which simplifies to negative 3 over 2. So notice how we got the same solutions. Okay, thank you.